My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags.
All right, we live? All right, well, welcome everybody to Behind Enemy Lines with Terry Newsom and Paul Drabick. We've got a little bit of a special show for you today. Terry's, we'll call it on assignment. We've got a couple guests with me today, a couple committeemen from a local Republican township organization. And we've had some interesting occurrences in the last couple weeks, haven't we, gentlemen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you'd think that weaponization of government is something that we only see at the national level, the federal level. Everybody's aware of what the FBI has been up to. Many people are aware of the Twitter files, right? And the FBI kind of pressuring the social media companies to censor conservatives and suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. And all that kind of stuff is kind of shocking, right? But it seems as though the left has been successful in shifting the Overton window to what's politically acceptable in America. So, you know, the media wants you to think that the violation of individual citizens' constitutional rights is just normal, and that we should just accept this moving forward as something that's, you know, what do we say, progressive?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of examples. I mentioned the Twitter files, the Obama administration. We had the 501c3s, the conservative 501c3s that were weaponized. The IRS was weaponized against them. The IRS targeting Matt Taibbi, one of the Twitter files journalists, right? During his congressional testimony, they came and weaponized themselves against Matt Taibbi. We also had the arrest of a father in Virginia for simply calling out the fact that his daughter was raped because Virginia decided that they were going to allow boys to go into the girls' bathrooms. And when this man decided that he was going to stand up in a school board meeting and call this out, the police arrested him. So, you know, there goes your freedom of speech as well. Recently, everybody should look this name up. Douglas Mackey, okay? M-A-C-K-E-Y, Douglas Mackey. In 2016, Douglas Mackey tweeted out a fake code for Hillary Clinton voters to vote for Hillary Clinton as a joke, right? Douglas Mackey was just put in prison, I think, for around 7 years. You can look it up yourselves, for the crime of supposedly taking away voters' rights by tweeting a joke for voters to vote for Hillary Clinton on Twitter. Well, there was a woman who did the same exact thing for Donald Trump. Nothing. She goes free. Now, we have an example of this at the federal level with my co-host, Terry Newsom. Terry Newsom spent the last 2-3 years going after the schools for the pornography, you know, genderqueer, blatant pornography in the schools, gender ideology being taught, CRT. We started speaking out against the schools for the COVID measures, for masking our kids and quarantining our kids and pushing vaccines on them and so forth. And, you know, that was something not a lot of people are doing, and particularly in Illinois, the Republican Party was not backing. So it was a bunch of courageous Republican fathers and mothers and people who, you know, wanted to protect their children, wanted to defend their children. And what do they get for it? They get their own party and the Democrats calling them radicals, extremist, anarchist. Terry spoke out so often and so loud that the federal government decided to put him on a terror watch list. He went to Phoenix, and he was trying to fly with his family, and he got pulled out of line by federal authorities. So the feckless Republicans will do nothing to defend parents' rights in speaking out for their children. It's us individual citizens who've got to take on this responsibility to defend our rights, to fight against Marxism, and to point out that the left has shifted the Overton window of what's politically acceptable to violate our constitutional rights and to make us think that that's normal and that we should just accept it. So, a lot of things have happened in the last few months in our own local organization that are alarming and mirror what the federal government and the DOJ and the FBI have been doing to harass and intimidate individual citizens, unconstitutionally, might I add. A few months ago, there was some brave committeemen in Downers Grove Township Republican Organization who wanted to call out that a couple county board members in DuPage County, Illinois, had donated to Democrats, and in particular Kim Fox, a Soros-funded district attorney here in Illinois out of Cook County, who is integral in the Cashless Bail Safety Act here in Illinois, which has spiked the crime levels. And so we tried to raise this issue. We tried to motion a vote for censure, which is a slap on the wrist, to say, look, Republicans aren't even standing up for Republican values. Not only that, they're contributing to the other side. Not only the other side, but more egregiously, Kim Fox, a Soros-funded district attorney whose sole interest is to destabilize society by increasing the crime rate so that the government come in and then solve that problem for us, thereby removing more of our rights because we'll have to be dependent on the government to protect us. So, of course, there were some Republicans that had a problem with this, wanted to censure these two Republicans on the county board. I believe their names were Pachelski and Tornatore, right?
And Jim Zay.
Yeah, and Jim Zay, right.
Yeah.
So our chairman in Downers Grove Township Republican Organization didn't want any part of that, doesn't know anything about the parliamentary rules, which we're supposed to go by, pretty much dismissed it. And his solution was to invite these gentlemen to our next meeting. They came to our meeting. They were pretty much indignant about, about these donations. They didn't care. They didn't feel the need to explain themselves. And then our chairman subsequently told all the committeemen who had these concerns and had been upset about this Republican behavior, so-called Republican behavior, that the Republican Party in Illinois didn't have any room for anarchists or radicals. Sort of standing up on his bully pulpit and admonishing his followers. So Terry Newsom and I didn't take too kindly to that. And we don't like to be told what to say and not to say. So we came to the next meeting, and we took the opportunity of new business, is what we call it, which is basically like our public comment section, to call out the Republican Party, to say that they aren't standing up for conservative values. I'm not an ideological person. I'm not, Republican just to be Republican. The problem that I have is people who say that they're standing up for particular values, and then when a Marxist agenda is injected into society, have nothing to say to combat it, will not stand up for children, will not call out pornography in schools, will not call out other Republicans for advocating for Amendment 1, which is strengthening public unions in Illinois down the path of communism. So this is the problem that I have with the Republicans, is they have no principles. And Terry and I stood up and we basically told the entire room that we stand with a group of committeemen, brave Republicans, not in name only, but who actually stand up for their values and speak out against the local government and the library and the school, who are trying to inject a Marxist agenda into the public institutions and indoctrinate our children. And we won't stand for it. We're losing our country. We're losing our children's future. And there are brave men and women who don't benefit whatsoever from going to these meetings and being overwhelmed by Democrats and liberals who admonish them and suggest that they're bigots and prejudice. And these people go to these meetings every month and they speak out because their own party doesn't have the guts or the political will to do so on their behalf, or even support them for that matter. Well, following that meeting, when Terry and I both got a standing ovation by the people who want to say what we said, but just don't, I'm not saying that they don't have the guts to do it. What I'm saying is that not everybody has, the talent to speak. Everybody's got a different talent. And we're asking people to join us and do whatever you can as a grassroots movement to stand up for our kids, for the future of this country, for freedom, for the Constitution, because our own feckless leadership won't do it themselves. And so it falls upon, as the Constitution says, the individual citizen to go out and to redress their grievances, to petition the government to redress their grievances. It's written explicitly in the First Amendment. That is our right, and it is our responsibility, and we must do it, particularly when we have political leadership who is shown to have corrupted itself and not represent the citizens any longer, but represent their own interest, special interest, corporate interest, and a privileged class that thinks that they know what's best for you, not you. You don't know what's best for you. The privileged class of politicians and corporate behemoths and bureaucrats know what's best for you. To hell with the Constitution, right? So, all right, I'm going to speed this up a little for the sake of time, because we had another weaponization of government issue at the local level as a result of Terry and I speaking out. So Terry and I got a hold of an email list for all the committeemen in our organization, and I had called out that our chairman was acting like a dictator and that he was censoring us because he had stricken out the public comments section of these meetings and not allowed us to speak, because we dared to say that we should be able to criticize Republicans who donate to a Soros-funded district attorney or who advocate for an amendment that would violate citizens' First Amendment rights, so that public unions would have plenary authority to be involved in legislation through collective bargaining. The idea that we would be able to call that out was not acceptable. Was not acceptable to Republican leadership in DuPage County. And so our chairman saw fit to censor us by removing our ability to speak, by removing our ability to criticize Republicans and officials who don't stand up for conservative principles. So Terry decided to send out a little Nazi Hitler meme that representing or characterizing our chairman. People got all upset about this, right? I've just described a litany of issues to where Republicans are acting more like Democrats or fascists than actual Republicans. And people don't get upset about that, but you throw a little bit of a Hitler meme out there about somebody, and then they can use that to say what you're saying doesn't matter. The fact that our constitutional rights are being violated, the fact that 250 years of the greatest country in the world, in the history of the world, is hanging in the balance is not important, because how dare you use a Hitler meme? I refuse to accept that argument. I'm not going to shut up just because you're upset about a Hitler meme. Do I want to offend people? Absolutely not. I don't want to offend people. That's not my point. I want to fight for our country. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I have a 3-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl, and I look at the future of this country and I say, what is becoming of it? And are my children going to have the same rights and values that I grew up with? Are they going to? Am I going to have to worry about them going to school and being indoctrinated with gender ideology, with some counselor telling them or encouraging them to chop off their genitals because they feel a certain way one day as opposed to the next, and that they can change their gender like it's a pair of shoes? No, I'm not minimizing what the Nazis did or who Hitler was. What I'm saying is you can't change the conversation just because you're offended by something. We have to address the issues on the table, which are we're losing our country, we're losing our rights, and Illinois is one of the spearheads in that movement the Marxification of our country. And so I sent out an email saying pretty much all of that to the committeemen, explaining our position and saying, look, that we're a grassroots movement and we're trying to speak for people who don't have a voice, who are being stifled and silenced by an establishment class that, quite frankly, hasn't done anything for Republicans in Illinois for a long time. I mean, we have a super majority of Democrats in the legislature, and we've lost the last 2 governor races. We have a 40-19 deficit in the state Senate. We have a 78-40 deficit in the House. We lost the last school board elections, 74% Democrats. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that we don't have a Republican Party, and yet there's this privileged class of leadership in the Republican Party who have been doing the same things over and over again and want to pat us grassroots people on the head and say, oh, no. This is the way it's going to go. Yes, the Overton window is shifting left because everything's left in the state of Illinois particularly, and the culture is moving left, and they're indoctrinating our children. But it doesn't matter. As long as we're Republicans in name only and you support us, things will change organically. Well, that's not going to happen. And so Terry sent that out, and I actually got a response from the sheriff of DuPage County. And Jason, can you bring up that email for us real quick? Okay.
Still trying to get Zoom fucking set up.
Okay, so we're having some technical difficulties. So I'll read the email to you. This is from Sheriff James Mendrick. Why would you create Nazi pictures for any reason? That is so disgusting. I'm not so sure about you. And 15 minutes later, if you were truly a good and honorable person, you would have already responded by saying Nazi pictures were a bad decision. I'm going to pause there because I have a day job, Terry and I don't get paid for this. So anybody saying that we're trying to get attention or, this is all some song and dance, we're not getting paid for this. We're actually taking a big risk here. Antifa goes after Terry on the regular, going after his job, going after his livelihood, right? Doxing him on social media, calling him a radical. There's no benefit that either one of us are getting from this. We're doing this because we want to defend our country, we want to defend our rights, we want to defend our children, and we want America to be a place where those kids can grow up with the same rights and privileges that many of us and many of those feckless Republicans who won't stand up for us enjoyed themselves. Moving on. But you did not, and that demonstrates you are happy with your choice to create Nazi memorabilia on your home computer. Absolutely horrible. Now I want to pause there for a second. Why would a sheriff say something like the following? But you did not, and that demonstrates you are happy with your choice to create Nazi memorabilia on your home computer. I'm a little curious about that reference of creating Nazi memorabilia on my home computer. It smells of a veiled threat. Now, I didn't create that me myself, but I thought that was a pretty interesting email to send. I reached out to Sheriff Mendrick and I provided an olive branch. And let me just say, I have no personal issue with Sheriff Mendrick. I actually like the guy. I had a conversation with him on the phone. The issue I have now, though, is that Terry and he had gotten into a bit of a back and forth in an argument. Now, look, I'll be the first to admit that Terry can be bombastic. Terry can push buttons. And, Terry can offend people. And I'll also be the first to admit that I don't agree with everything Terry says. But I'll tell you one thing. I'll die defending his right to say it because we live in a free country and we have the First Amendment and we are allowed to say what we believe from a political perspective. So Terry got a little upset with Sheriff Mendrick in a back and forth email conversation that then led on to a text message conversation. And by the time we were doing our podcast last week, Terry had some choice words for Sheriff Mendrick, and Sheriff Mendrick didn't take too kindly to that. So over the weekend, Terry had heard from certain proxies that were speaking to Sheriff Mendrick, telling Terry to take out the messaging from the podcast that referenced Sheriff Mendrick. He started hearing from certain proxies that had contacted Sheriff Mendrick that Sheriff Mendrick was volunteered background information on Terry, and Terry had done some things in his past that they were going to put a magnifying glass on, and they started, basically threatening Terry through proxy. I'm not saying it was Sheriff Mendrick. It could be a group of people. I'm not sure. All I know is we have emails from Terry showing that he called out on Sunday night that these threats were made. He did remove a portion of the podcast from last week that mentioned Sheriff Mendrick's name. And Terry was told that he was being threatened with arrest for the crime of political speech. So last Tuesday, the state police showed up at Terry's house. Jason, are we able to play? Why don't we play? Why don't we pull up that email from Sheriff Mendrick real quick? And
They're not named good. I'm guessing this is it.
let's see if we got it. So Terry had criticized Sheriff Mendrick. He criticized John Curran, who advocated for Amendment 1 and wouldn't speak out against the radical CRT and pornography agenda in the schools. And we've called out the rhinos repeatedly. And so the state police showed up at Terry's house on Tuesday. And no, let's take that one down. That's not it. We'll just go to the video.
You got it.
Let's go to the video.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that set up because I've been running around.
Yeah, I hear you. Do you have the video
I
though?
can get it. Just give me a second.
Okay. This is we're not getting paid for this, folks. So we, hey, we'd be happy. By the way, please like, subscribe, thumbs up our channel. The more people we get, the bigger this grassroots movement is going to get, and the bigger our voice is going to be, and the better chance we have of removing the rhino class in Illinois. Because, folks, let's be honest, there is no Republican Party in Illinois. I told you about the supermajority the Democrats have. I told you that we lost the last two governor races. We're a state that had to endure the tyranny of Michael Madigan for 30 plus
Then you
years.
need to apologize to everybody from the...
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that was the video. So we're going to play a video here to show you what Terry said that had people in DuPage County in power sending the state police to his house.
Then you need to apologize to everybody from the DGTRO that you called anarchist. You need to apologize to me.
Need to reverse
if not,
the censorship.
I'm going to pummel you. I'm going to pummel Kern. I don't know. This is a little show. It's new. But you know what? You guys don't represent our values. You don't support us. And by the way, in my precinct, I kicked ass for the Republicans. You know what? Not because I'm a sophisticated new precinct captain. I went and talked to everybody and told them about what's going on in our schools and everything. I bet you any one of you, including you, Bolts, compare what happened in my precinct to your precinct. And if we would have done as well as I did, the state would be red.
Okay, so and then Jason, if you can find that picture of the state police at his front door. Terry has a ring video of the entire conversation, and they had said that they've been sent to his house regarding political speech about Senator John Curran. So this is the state that we live in. This is the county that we live in. Not only will Democrats in America advocate for the FBI and the Department of Justice to go after you if you speak
Then you
out
need to
against the
apologize to
establishment,
everybody
and there
from
you
the
have it. There
DGTRO
you see the badges there.
that you called anarchist.
guys
You need to
need-
apologize to
you
me.
need to
If
reverse
not,
the
I'm going to
censorship
pummel you. I'm
because
going
he
to pummel
dared get on a
Kern.
podcast.
I don't know.
And he dared engage in a political conversation with a sheriff in DuPage County. Now, am I saying that Sheriff Mendrick specifically ordered that to happen? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm telling you that there was a cascade of events regarding a private citizen using political speech to criticize an establishment Republican class and a law enforcement class for not standing up for citizens' rights. And what did he get for it? A visit by the state police. And they were there for that reason. I mean, we're going to post that video of that Ring doorbell video to our channel so you can see that they were confronting him about criticizing a state senator on a podcast. Okay? This is the America we live in. This is the Illinois we live in. This is the Illinois we want to bring our kids up in. A Marxified Illinois where we can't speak our minds. Not only about the Democrats who are destroying our state with unconstitutional laws, but the Republicans who won't stand up against them, who not only won't stand up against them, but won't even speak about it, right? So, I'm almost through with my monologue here. I'm going to bring in my two guests. One of the things that, one of the issues in Illinois and across the country is what's called the Overton window. And the political left has been savvy about weaponizing the Overton window. The Overton window is simply just the measure of what's politically acceptable, right? So I mentioned the supermajority Democrats in Illinois and the fact that they're waging war on the Constitution with unconstitutional laws. We have non-citizens becoming police officers. We have a book ban bill which violates parents' First Amendment rights to petition the government for redress of grievances and allows the libraries and library systems to put whatever propaganda, pornography, or otherwise into the libraries. And then they tell you that it's book banning. Because the Democrats are good at, it's a book ban bill. It's against book banning because the Democrats are good at marketing. But it's the furthest thing from protecting your rights. It's actually removing your rights. We have Amendment 1, which is another violation of the First Amendment, giving plenary power and overriding the legislator, allowing public unions to have the ability to legislate themselves by being able to collectively bargain on such broad terms as economic welfare and safety. Okay? That is the path to communism. Amendment 1 is something that we should talk about a lot more, and I'll talk about with our guests today. We have the Safety Act, which is cashless bail, which is just a blatant injection of more crime into the state. You know, driving away business, driving away citizens, creating an effective hellscape for a state. We have the assault weapons ban, a violation of the Second Amendment. Say what you will. We could talk about gun rights. We could talk about gun legislation. We could talk about that argument or that back and forth. But it is a blatant violation of the Second Amendment. So these things are happening where the left is creating unconstitutional legislation in Illinois. And the reason is because the Democrats have complete power in Illinois. And with that power, they've taken the Overton window and they've shifted it far left. So an example of this would be, the left is trying to say in America that it's culturally acceptable to mutilate children's genitals because on any given day they decide that they aren't a girl, that they're a boy, or they aren't a boy, they're a girl. And there are people advocating for this for adolescent children in America, right? Governor Pritzker and his family donate to medical centers and UCLA and all over the country that will do these kind of operations. You had Vanderbilt University, the guy from Daily Wire posted the videos of Vanderbilt University giving presentations about this type of thing, saying that we have to silence people that speak out against this here because we stand to make a lot of money off of these types of surgeries, right? So again, the point is the Overton window has been shifted to the left. They're savvy politically. They understand that to hold power, that to hold political power, you have to shift the Overton window. You have to shift what's politically acceptable in America towards your side of the political spectrum. And when you're able to do that,
I'm on. I'm standing by.
Thanks, Chris. We'll get to you. We have another guest on the line waiting for us too. When you're able to do that, when you're able to shift the Overton window, the what's politically acceptable to your side of the political spectrum, you can then legislate unconstitutional laws, because what happens is everything else comes left with you. And I've heard so many people, so many Republicans tell me we have to go after the middle, we have to go after the middle, we have to go after the middle. Well, the Democrats have control of all the institutions in America, and they have control of them in Illinois as well. They have control of media. They have control of education. They have control of arts and entertainment. They have control of corporate interest, particularly big tech and social media. So they've got control of the message, right, in media and social media. And they've got control of large swaths of government as well. So I'm going to read you something. Do you have that article that you can bring up, Jason, so they can read along with us? This is a politician in Illinois. He is a former mayor, I believe, of Elmhurst, and DuPage County board member who is running for DuPage County recorder. And his name is Pete DiCiani. And there, let's see, you got it up. Do you want to bring it?
I'm trying to get it over there.
Okay.
I'm trying to do like 10 things at once.
Sorry. So, again, our producer doesn't get paid either. So there it is. Yeah, Pete DiCiani announces candidacy for DuPage County recorder. I'll be running as a Democrat in the primary election. So I'm just going to read you some of this here. Quote from Pete DiCiani. I'll be running as a Democrat in the primary election. Though I still have conservative values, sadly, the ideology of the Republican Party of DuPage is one I can no longer support. The DuPage GOP views words like moderate and bipartisan as four-letter words. This view has cost the party dearly the past few election cycles. This is a guy that was advocating for a Democrat during the last election cycle who wanted to, who wanted to pass a bill in Illinois that would have allowed for those who did not receive the COVID vaccine to face tracking and possible detention. So, when I hear a guy like this, or any Republican in Illinois tell me that, oh, the Republicans don't understand what the middle is, like, pal, you don't understand what the political landscape is. Either you're ignorant, or you're just blind with corruption, or you have a lust for power that is undetectable in your own eyes. Because the fact of the matter is, everything in Illinois is left. You're suggesting the Republican Party is the problem? Well, you're right. The Republican Party is the problem. But the problem is that they've gone all the way to the left with the Democrats. They have no political will, and they have no political power. And therefore, we lose our constitutional rights. And you know what? We have to deal with people like you now saying, I'm running as a Democrat because Republicans are the problem. So this is the issue that we're dealing with. And Terry's on assignment trying to talk to some people about helping us out. With that, I'm going to bring in our guests here today. We have a couple committeemen with us, Jeff Mack and Noel Manley, who've been on the show with us before.
Thanks, Paul.
And we
thanks
got
for having us back.
Chris Adamo on the line as well. How you doing, Chris?
Good to see you. How you doing?
Good. Chris is, of course, the author of Rules for Defeating Radicals. Which we've been talking about a lot lately, especially Terry. It's been good in our recent fight, Chris, because we've run into a lot of rhinos. The rhino problem has gotten a lot bigger. Terry and I have dared to challenge the establishment, and instead of having a conversation with us, they think they deem it necessary to to silence us, silence our voices in our meetings, and weaponize law enforcement against us. And I think it's backfiring on them because we're not shutting up, as you can tell.
Yeah, the only way that will succeed is if you shut up. If they intimidate you and you back down, or like Mendrick tried a few weeks ago, he got his feelings hurt and he needed to apologize to you. Try to apologize. It's never going to be enough, and it's only a means of them clawing their way onto their phony moral high ground. So whatever they're doing gets a pass, and you're playing defensive as if you've actually done something wrong.
Right.
I want to just digress just briefly,
Sure.
because my book, I started out writing it against Saul Alinsky, who was a Marxist, who the Democrat Party had adopted Alinsky to use his dirty tricks, his underhanded tactics, his lies, his intimidation, his mockery of the truth. They were using that to advance the Democrat agenda. About 2/3 of the way through the book, I realized, their fifth column, and if you remember Sun Tzu in Ancient War, fifth column was the army that sneaks in from behind and
Right.
gets you from behind and cuts you off at the knees. Their fifth column is the rhinos. And so you got three kinds of rhinos. You got the ones who are truly morally ambiguous. They just don't know any better. Those ones you can usually work with if you educate them.
Right.
You got the cowards. They're gonna run from whoever they think is most powerful. But you also have, and I'm telling you, this last guy looks like one of them to me. You also have the ones who are and have been leftists all along, and they just know in some races they stand a better chance appealing to people if they call themselves Republican. But once they get in, they do like John McCain. They wait for every opportunity to stab the real conservatives in the back.
Right. I totally agree with you on all that. And Terry and I are getting a political education on all those things that you mentioned.
Well, that's only because you've been so effective.
Well, I appreciate that.
Exactly.
I want to bring in Jeff and Noel on this piece because, folks, what I would say about what's going on in America is something that I do some speeches for the American Legion. I've spoken to kids in high school. And one of the messages I always try to pass on to them is the best way that you can thank veterans or people that serve their country is to get involved yourself, to get involved with your community, to be part of the solution, to be part of, the system that serves you so well. The best way to give back to the system is to contribute to it, right? So I'm sitting here with a couple of guys that have done as such. These are two gentlemen that have gone to a lot of those meetings in the school boards and the libraries. In fact, that's where I first met them. And, it's a thankless job, as I'm sure you're aware, Chris. So I want to get your perspective. We'll start with you, Noel. You had just gone to a library meeting last night. And why don't you give Chris and I and Jeff, I know you've been there as well, but a little background on why we've been fighting the library in Downers Grove of late.
Well, this all came to a head last year when two things happened. One was we found out about this discovery report.
Pull that a little closer.
One was we found out about this discovery report, which was an $86,000 equity report written by this equity consultant, and actually cookie cut from a previous client.
I saw it, yeah.
But it was racially divisive, filled with racial invective. The victim oppressor narrative was just permeated every aspect of it, and it made the town of Downers Grove seem like it was a bastion of racism,
right?
Which couldn't be further from the truth.
Dividing North against South because of economic lines and so forth.
And then shortly after that, they were pushing this drag queen bingo for kids event.
Right.
And,
can't imagine why there were so many people at the town meeting that time, right?
Yeah, we went to the library board and the village board because the library is an extension of city government.
Yeah.
And laid our case out, which was very direct. It was, first of all, it's inappropriate for children. And second of all, it's inappropriate to host it in a taxpayer venue.
Right, right.
And we took a lot of heat for that, but we went to the board and we brought 100 people with us. And they eventually relented and they canceled the event.
But correct me if I'm wrong, they were a bit dishonest about the numbers, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
If they had the numbers, why why cancel the event? Because that's what they suggested.
Correct. And so the event was canceled, and but it continues on. Now they've created this native land
It's almost
statement,
comical, some of this stuff.
and
The land
essentially
acknowledgement.
the land
Yeah.
acknowledgement, and I'm part native, I'm part Ojibwe, and I find it personally offensive that it takes native people and continues this victim
Right.
narrative. And I think anybody of native background would know that most native cultures are a warrior culture, and that's represented in the American military. In fact, if you go to any powwow, the first thing they do is they ask all the vets or anybody serving to stand up, and they're all honored. Now, if you read this land statement, that's completely absent, and any of the accomplishments and contributions of Native people are completely absent. What isn't absent is the list of what's the word I'm looking for?
Grievances.
Right.
So, and now the latest revision, they're going after the Catholic Church as being a co-partner with the federal government in cultural genocide. Now, being Native and Catholic, I took offense to both. And we
Imagine that.
And we called them out on that. And my grandmother, she went through one of these Native schools, the Haskell Indian Institute in Lawrence, Kansas. She went in speaking Ojibwe. She came out speaking Ojibwe. She wasn't stripped of her culture. In fact, she passed it on to my brother and my sister and myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it was never an issue there. Now, maybe there's some insensitivity at the time, but
Sure.
I'm not going to be a person in the 21st century judging somebody in the late 19th and early
Right.
20th centuries. But the bottom line here is that this library is continuing on with this divisive agenda.
The woke ideology seems to be, ramping up.
Yeah, Marxist in its basis,
Right.
and it doesn't take somebody. It doesn't require a PhD to figure out what they're trying to do.
Right.
And we've decided to stand up and say no, and we do it on a regular basis, and we're not afraid of the pushback. I mean, last night we were.
There's plenty of pushback,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but on the other side is we get no support from the people who you would think would be in charge of the Republican organizations in this county.
No support, none. Not what they don't even mention it at the meetings.
No.
Nothing, not a peep.
Yeah.
They don't want to touch it.
Yeah. And it's the same thing also in the schools. I mean, they don't want to touch the CRT nonsense. They don't want to talk about the tampons in the boys' bathrooms. They don't want to talk about the gender ideology that's
Right.
out there. All they want to talk about is we can't offend the middle. We can't
Right.
offend the independents.
An offense is equal to just voicing into the public square what is true about the material that's available to children.
Yeah. And what's the result? Well, people are voting with their feet. They're either leaving the state of Illinois or they're leaving public education. Hinsdale South, not even 2 miles from here, used to have almost 1,800 children about 6-7 years ago. They're down to 1,200, and it's continuing to go down.
Right.
And why is that? Because people are choosing to go private or they're choosing to homeschool their children
Right.
because they're tired of the nonsense.
Yeah. So, Chris, I want to bring you back in on this because obviously Noel's just laid out a perfectly present example of Marxism being weaponized through a public institution, namely the library.
Right.
So, in my mind, listening to Noel describe some of those things, the library is obviously something that they see as an effective tool for propaganda.
One of many, but yeah.
Right. Is that something you're seeing maybe in your area? And do you have any?
Yeah, and let me just say something real fast. Now, I don't live in Wyoming anymore. Now, one of the excuses the rhinos in Illinois will use is that it's such a blue state, and so we've got to try and work with them. We got to meet in the middle, moderate, and blah blah blah.
Bingo.
I came from Wyoming. Most of the time, most of my experience about rhinos was dealing with the Wyoming Republican Party the Wyoming legislature, which back when I was there, it was, Wyoming has like the highest Republican voter registration of any state in the country. And yet the Republican Party was using one excuse after another to essentially shut us conservative Christians down and to pander to the left. And I mean, you literally have in the state legislature, you have, 58, 59 Republicans and 5 Democrats in the state house, and somehow we have to try and appeal to them and reach across the aisle. Everything ends up getting done their way, and it's because the party machinery. Now, sidetrack a little bit. This is changing in Wyoming because of people like Knowles and you guys, the other gentlemen here. But the party machinery was really big on the idea of getting along by essentially governing as a bunch of Vermont Democrats in Wyoming.
Yeah.
This is what they do everywhere, and yeah, they'll use the library. If you go into the library
why
and
do you
you
thi- I
hold out
mean,
a Bible, then you can't do that. Separation of church and state, you might offend someone. But they put a drag queen in there, suddenly it's free speech and all this other stuff. And you're right, that people are leaving this. People
Yes,
across
absolutely.
the ethnic spectrum look at this kind of garbage. They don't want that for their kids.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think obviously the library still has some power in terms of a propaganda outlet. Otherwise, you wouldn't see as much of this. It wouldn't be as prevalent, especially the drag queen stuff, because that's something we see everywhere, right? It doesn't matter what state. We even see it in Republican states. Jeff, I want to bring you in because we actually have experience working together. For everybody, I don't know if I probably mentioned this on the podcast before, but I had somebody over the weekend. Or over this last week, tell me after some of the emails that I had sent out, like, if you want to change things, run for something. It's like, hey, listen, I worked with the establishment. I worked for a consulting company that was doing some work for our township Republican organization. I worked directly with establishment. I tried. I put myself in there, and what I saw was a cancer that needed to be cut out, like something that Republicans aren't going to be able to get anywhere in the state unless we get rid of the establishment that doesn't serve
Absolutely
serve our principles. So Jeff, I'd love to hear your perspective on that time that we had working together, and what are some of the things that you saw from that Rhino class?
Well, working closely with them.
Pull that a little bit closer.
All right. Yeah, working closely with them. They have this expectation that you're really just a cog in the machine. Serve, those in power.
Right.
Don't have your own opinion.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat. And honor the people in power.
know your place.
Exactly. Know your place. Right. And then, as you were talking about a few minutes ago, when you started to stand up, you and Terry started to do that. Well, we had another committeeman that's not here tonight.
Yeah, Scott Melrose, who deserves a shout out because he was the one who wanted to censure these rhinos.
Yes, he's the one that kind of lit the match.
We love you, Scott.
Yeah, we certainly do. And I'm sorry to see him leave. He's so disgusted he's leaving.
Yep.
But and I've tried hard to keep him, but when you start pushing back, they start doing things to chill free speech.
It is incredible, right?
Yeah.
And it's and Chris, one of the things that we experience is like the idea that a Republican would engage in censorship, to protect the establishment is just mind-boggling to me, because it's like, look, it couldn't be more apparent that is happening on the left side of the political spectrum all across our country right now. Mm-hmm. The only party that's advocating for the weaponization of the FBI and the Department of Justice in America is the left. Right.
And let me just really jump in right there, because I understand how you feel. And again, I went through this same awakening with the Wyoming Republicans several decades ago. I thought they were conservative. No, they're not. What you have is you have self-serving leftists. In some places, it's more pragmatic to call themselves Democrats. In other places, they call themselves Republicans, and yet you see the exact same behavior out of them. This guy that's running, that posted this thing up there, he'll be running as a Democrat. This guy was always a liberal. He was always a leftist. Maybe at times it worked good to call himself a Republican.
Right.
But when you look at what they advocate, they take things to the left. And when you get in there, like you gentlemen are heroically doing and saying, this is what we stand for as conservatives, this is what we stand for as Americans, you might be surprised that they're your enemy, but they've always been your enemy.
Right,
They've always
right. That's
been.
good point.
Now, what they had in the past was they had you, me, others like us that were a little bit naive about just how malicious and how ideologically opposed to us they actually were.
Right.
And so we thought we were on their team. We'd put out the yard signs, and things of this nature. But they have no intention of granting you something that will actually move the agenda to the right, because they're leftists.
Right.
And whatever they
Right.
call themselves, you can go down and see the things they stand for and the things that they will. Now they may voice, I'm good guy. I want family values. And then when it comes time to stand for it, they'll have some excuse to backtrack, and they'll have some excuse to attack you publicly. Whatever excuse they can drum up, they'll have some excuse to attack you viciously and publicly in a manner that they never go after the Democrats, because their goal is to keep that Democrat leftist agenda moving forward and to stop people like you from obstructing it.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because one of the points I wanted to make was that they are going after people within our organization, within the Republican organization, with more viciousness
Absolutely.
than they've ever gone after a Democrat.
Absolutely.
And recent dirty tricks that have been played.
It's almost a visceral reaction.
It absolutely is.
Well, they're
And, I'll
desperate.
just give you, again, coming from Wyoming, you see Liz Cheney never talked about Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. She sat
Right.
happily between them, talking
Right.
about how she was upholding the Constitution. And the threat to the Constitution and the rule of law was Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. But
you
these
guys-
people are desperate, and
Yeah. Absolutely.
they are actually, their recent actions and dirty tricks that they've pulled.
We're going to
And-
touch on that a little
Yeah,
bit
I didn't know
later.
how much you wanted to talk
We
about
are going to
that.
talk about that for sure.
Okay, but-
we got another surprise for you, Chris. But let's continue on this track. Because for me, the Rhino agenda doesn't comport with reality. And if you look at look at the national perspective, right? And I'm not here to advocate for any politician in particular, and I don't believe in cult of personality, but it would appear as though the country, in terms of the electorate, prefers Donald Trump. Okay. Now, if you look at the representatives in majority, whether it be the RNC or people like Chris Christie or Mitch McConnell or people that we've described as rhinos in the past, or you've heard described as rhinos, they will try to steer the electorate away from the Donald Trump thing. And to me, it doesn't make sense to me. If I was coaching a team, or if I was a consultant, I'd say, like, listen, your customers, they want this product, and you're trying to tell me that you want to push something else. Like, either you have a bad business instinct, right? Or you have corrupt motives.
Or you have a big ego in the way too.
Well, that comes into play, but you'll usually find that it's something a lot more base than that. And if we're not going to deal into particular candidates, let's just talk about a few issues here. Let's talk about the border wall. Okay, let's talk about Obamacare and these two things that Americans were outraged at how they were muscled through on us, this open border disaster that was going through. And what happened when the unnamed president that we won't talk about tried to actually close the border?
Right.
Who was there screaming about the budget and screaming about how we couldn't do it? Paul Ryan,
Right.
former Republican Speaker of the House and VP candidate under Mitt Romney. Again, they end up, if you listen to Ryan these days, he's as venomous as Liz Cheney
Oh,
and
yeah.
Mitt Romney,
Yeah.
Adam Kinzinger and others. And yeah, they go after securing the border. They go after making America great with a venom that they never seem to have for Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
And we're
And it's
supposed to
because
listen to
they
them.
were in cahoots the whole time. They hate getting forced out into the light, and that's what they're really mad about right now is that their cover has been blown.
And we're yet we're supposed to listen to these people, but the popular opinion shows that there is no favor for them. There is no,
Right.
the attention, the tolerance that conservatives or Republicans have for this people is nil, and you see that by half the people you mentioned already being out of office.
So back in the 1990s, I was on the Republican Platform Committee for the state of Wyoming, and the state chairman comes in the room and he's giving a talk about what we should and shouldn't pass on the Platform Committee. And instead of it being a result of the grassroots, what does the grassroots conservatives want the Republican Party to be? He's explaining, in his words, he says, do not give our candidates positions that are difficult to defend. And so, of course, me being the quiet, passive person I immediately raised my hand. I said, hey, nothing is more difficult to defend than cowardice. And I got shut down at that point.
Right. Hey, my thoughts precisely about the situation in Illinois. Noel, did you want to jump in here?
And the formula is very simple. 1, stand for something. And 2, be aggressive.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, listen, politics should be about principle. It's not. That's the problem.
Right.
But, America should be about principle, because we stand on a document that is unprecedented in the history of governance in civilization. And you can argue that all you want. I think the record speaks for itself. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and you brought up the border wall and some of the national issues, Chris. One of the things I want to talk about on here is Amendment 1 in Illinois. And I wanted to get your guys' perspective, and then Chris, you can jump in on this because it'll make sense to you as to why a rhino might do something like this. But we have a Senate Minority Leader in John Curran, and a Republican in name only. And what I found particularly interesting, and you gentlemen were there with me last year, during the election cycle, Senator Curran came around and told us that Amendment 1 was in the hill to die on. Now, Chris, for your information, Amendment 1 in Illinois was an amendment to the Illinois Constitution that allowed plenary power for public unions, in that it instantiated into the Constitution the ability for public unions to collectively bargain under such broad terms as economic welfare and safety, meaning that they could essentially subvert the legislative process from the state legislature and say, well, the teachers don't feel safe, so if they're not able to teach gender ideology, so it's got to be part of the curriculum. Or let's say, public unions were... they don't feel safe, so the Illinois Department of Public Health is going to have to mandate vaccines for anybody who steps into a public building or a private building, for that matter, in Illinois. So these are the things that are, these unions are capable of doing. John Curran went around and told us that it wasn't a hill to die on. In my mind, it's the direct path to communism. And subsequently, he runs in a D+3, right? Unopposed by a Democrat. Okay. In Sean Casten, one of the most blue, House of Representatives representative in Congress, and then thereafter gets elected, and all of a sudden is state Senate Minority Leader. I mean, in my mind, we should just call him what he is, a Democrat.
Yeah, well, and not only that, he took, hundreds of thousands of dollars from unions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he was bought and paid for by the unions.
And bought and paid for is exactly the way to characterize that.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's a rhino of the worst sort. He's not really a rhino. He's a interloper.
Absolutely.
You know, and he runs unopposed in his Senate district. And
Gee, I wonder why he ran unopposed.
well, we'll find out when we primary him because he.
Yeah, see, and that's what needs to happen is they need to be primaried. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. That's the big,
That'll
issue
wake up
here.
the Democrats and they'll run somebody against.
Right.
So we have
Yeah.
to find a good, strong primary challenger.
Well, what I would tell you right off the bat is the party will try to tell you, look, you need a moderate because you've got to have somebody. And what the moderate Republican, their campaign slogan is something like this: to the Democrats, I will do as half as much for you as your party will do for you. So vote for me. Well, that's a disaster, and that's how your moderates think they're going to win. And then the party comes out and says, hey, look. He couldn't win. He wasn't moderate enough. We need to move further left. What you need, do you know which president had the highest vote amongst minorities in the last half century? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the moderate George Bush. When you have somebody that can inspire a community by running on a conservative platform that will help out people of every ethnicity, that will combat the leftist onslaught against our children, things like this. You don't have to run as a moderate. As a matter of fact, you will outshine the moderates and the Democrats. You talked about that particular district being 3 points in favor of the Democrats. You can have easily a 3-point crossover at that point. You will not get the crossover if you're trying to imitate the opposition.
Well, I was going to say the hardest challenge to an opposition is not actually opposing them.
Yeah.
That's kind of key to having an opposition is to actually state that you don't agree with their agenda or their policies. I mean, I think the reason that we go after Curran is he's the head of a snake. Like, again, I don't have anything against the guy personally. I don't even know him. But if we're talking about preserving, constitutional democracy for a republic, which is what we are, a representative government, then we have to call out people like this who advocate for something as egregious as Amendment 1, as if it were some benign regular policy adjustment. No, he's handing the keys, to the drunk guy. That's exactly what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And he's suggesting that everything's going to be fine. And you know what? He's destroying, he's directly helping a political class destroy the future for our kids. And
not think that he does this without knowing what he's doing.
That's my biggest thing, Chris.
Absolutely, he knows.
That's my biggest thing is like I don't take these people for fools. I think they do things based on self-interest, based on based on special interest, right?
Based on what you mentioned, the follow the money.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to think your opposition are fools.
Right.
Because they're not.
No,
they're very,
absolutely
very
not.
smart people.
We've learned pretty quickly, Terry and I, that they'll do anything and everything to tarnish your reputation if you try to challenge them.
Oh yeah.
Chris, one of the things that we just encountered on Monday of this week was that Terry and I went to and Noel and Jeff, from that matter. I think Noel, you weren't there, but we went to our township Republican organization meeting, and we found out that somebody had dug up information, paid for a background check of information on Terry. Terry has a bit of a checkered past, but it's been 35 years. He's he's corrected his ways. Not only that, I put up Terry's record against any one of these Republicans. He's been out pounding the pavement, getting on the media and calling out the stuff that's going on in the schools. And that's a lot more that I can say for any of our representatives in government or the bureaucrats that support them.
And it's a story of redemption.
Absolutely, and that's
Yes.
what people want to see. And so they had printed out this information, they put a packet together, and they passed it around. And
This
I
is
have
near Terry.
This is on Terry. This was
And
information.
I'm saying
Terry.
it's a smear tactic.
Yeah.
Gee, that looks like the stuff that we saw from Obama. That looks like the stuff we saw from Hillary Clinton.
And
I
these are
thought it was just the
Republicans.
Democrats that did that. Well, what you see is from Illinois leftists who do that, and some of them are dishonest enough to call themselves Republicans and conservatives,
Right.
and they're behaving in exactly the same manner.
And I have it on good authority. We have an anonymous source that tells us our town assessor Greg Bolts had a direct hand in this, and he's been a thorn in the side of real Republicans, of real conservatives. I met him a couple of years ago when I first got involved in politics, and I knew right away that this guy, he wasn't interested in conservative values. He talked a lot about God, but he did the exact opposite of anybody that would be a follower of the Bible, of Jesus.
Well, I will remind you that
manipulating
Nancy
people.
Pelosi, she's done that. Obama's done that.
Yeah.
They all become. Bill Clinton was a good Baptist, and yet they all govern like they're serving the accuser of the brethren,
Absolutely.
the father of lies. I mean, it's like
a person like Greg Bolts who would dig up dirt on a private citizen who dares to speak out against the establishment, Republican establishment, who is directly responsible for reigning communism on Illinois. A guy like that who will invoke God. Right. This is a guy that'll bring people into churches to beg them for, political money, for fundraising money. Right. He's bullied committeemen. He's manipulated people. He's spread rumors about people. He's talked behind their backs. He's done all of this to me, and he's a feckless politician who has no ability for relating to other people. He
uses lies, intimidation, and
intimidation,
dirty tactics.
Yeah.
I want to reiterate
tactics.
something I think I heard you say a minute ago. You said that these things that he brought up on Terry were 35 years ago.
Well, not only that, Chris, one of the things that was most that was just pure disgusting was part of the packet was a list of sexual offenders that lived in any neighborhood that Terry has lived in throughout his life. So, right, the implication is that what? What is it, Greg? Greg, are you trying to suggest that Terry pals around with sex offenders? Yep. I mean, Greg Bolts is the problem with the Republican Party. He and John Curran, I find them at most meetings palling around together, probably discussing how they can be they can solidify the club for each other, and all the other, establishment Republicans who are just going to continue to help shrink the constitutional rights of everybody in the state of Illinois. What was it? George Carlin said a long time ago, right? It's a big club and you ain't in it. And that's what Greg Bolts and John Curran want to do. So it's people like that try to weaponize God and the Bible, who, they stand on the opposite side
without
of
actually
the
standing
right
in any way
things.
for his principles. They stand for the exact opposite, but they invoke his name in some sort of leverage that they think that you and everybody else out there is gullible enough to conflate biblical truth and the sacrifice of Jesus and things like this. We're going to conflate that with this rhino leftist agenda, and somehow people aren't going to see a bit of a discord there.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, the idea that you would invoke God as a partner in your corrupt agenda, that's something that I saw through right away. But it's also something that you see from rhinos in general, right? Because they're going to sit on their platform and in their position, their bully pulpit, and they'll talk down to you and say, you know what, this is what we got to do. We got to elect Republicans. That's what our chairman had told us. Our job, our mission, our charter says that we need to elect Republicans. And all Terry and I have ever done was stand up and say, hold on a minute. When are we going to address the elephant in the room, which is we have Republicans that are in office now that aren't Republicans, that don't stand up for conservative values. Yeah, exactly. I think we got to hit the pause button before we say just red or dead, and we say, what are the principles that we stand for? What
Well,
are the people
exactly
that we're
the original
electing
purpose of a
stand for
political
them?
party of a properly functioning political party is to advance a set of principles, to get the group, the strength of numbers to advance a particular set of ideals.
Bingo.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You get a party in the phase of decay and corruption, and what you end up having is the club that you're not in, and their purpose is to advance themselves. And if they can get you as a pawn to think you're going to get some crumbs dropped off of the table in doing this, they'll be happy to do that. But when you get your people in these positions where you're trying to elect them, then they come up with these things like you've heard the establishment use the term unelectable. Now, these are the people, and again, I'm going to go back to 2016. In 2016, these were the people telling us that Jeb Bush was the candidate because he was, quote, most electable.
Right.
And you know, I mean, the guy doesn't get a yawn from anybody, but the point is they dictate these things. They dictate them from the perspective that they are the party, that they are the expertise, and that you, little pawns out there, you just go put out the yard signs, pull the levers when we tell you, and shut up.
Well, that's just it. That's just it. It's a privileged class. You know, and that's what I'm saying. Greg Boltz and John Kern represent is this idea that we no longer reside in a representative government landscape, right? We reside in a landscape where special interest and a privileged class that colludes with that special interest, with the corporate interest, and you know, expanding the bureaucracies. This is this club that they've created, and they operate by the rules for thee but not for me principle. And this is the kind of thing that not just in America but across the world we have to eradicate. If COVID wasn't our big, you know, signal that we are entering a paradigm shift in the history of civilization, it's either going to be us or them. And I'll tell you, there's more of us than them, and people should recognize that, because we are at a place in history where we have beautiful technologies such as podcasting, where we can circumvent this ability that they have to censor us from a bully pulpit in a little township organization meeting at some Indian restaurant. We can come on to a podcast and say you're full of crap. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and you made a very good statement when you said us versus them, and it's a lot more of us. So their number one weapon against us is to convince us that we need to be silenced.
Right.
And one of the things they do, and I heard you all alluding to this in one way or another, is they claw their way, and this is leftists, and okay, the rhinos are no different. So when I'm talking about the leftists, when I'm talking about Alinsky, I'm also talking about the rhinos. They claw their way onto this phony moral high ground, where what they're doing is the virtuous thing for the good of humanity, for the good of the party, whatever. And you are the troublemakers, and they'll come up with a million different evil things that are going to happen if you get your way.
Right.
And from that perspective, if you buy into that, they convince you to shut up. They convince you that they're the experts, let them run things, and you sit back and allow it to happen.
Right.
And that's thankfully since 2016, when a certain person we won't mention got elected, that the rhinos have been increasingly unmasked. And that's what they're mad about. That's the reason people like Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, Adam Kinzinger, that's why they will go after Donald Trump with venom that they never had for people like Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler.
It's how dare you challenge the establishment. I want to shift gears real quick.
The emperor has no clothes.
Well, that's exactly right, Noel. And I want to shift gears real quick, and we're going to hit just a couple more things. We're going to wrap up here. I think we've been going for a little bit. You know what? It's interesting to me, and Chris, meeting these guys a couple of years ago and seeing how outnumbered they were and speaking out, particularly in the COVID situation, right? Because that was one of those, you know, everybody got scared, but, you know, I saw some like-minded people like saying, hold on a second.
It never sounded right.
It never sounded right. But, and I'm not even addressing COVID, but I want to ask, we'll start with Noel and then we'll go to Jeff. Noel, tell me why it is that you don't gain anything from this. You don't make any money. You don't it's not pleasant to be bullied or yelled at or talked down to or called a bigot. Give me some insight into why it is that you continue to go and exercise your constitutional rights and speak out against this stuff.
Well, I have core principles. There are things that I believe in that I don't really compromise on. And when you see government, whether it's the schools or the libraries, stepping on those principles, I'm prepared to step up and say something. And when I first started with this, I'm not a very good public speaker, but you know what? I've gotten a lot better now that I've done it more.
Practice makes perfect.
And it does. It takes a little courage.
Absolutely, it does.
If you don't want to step up and talk, just go to a board meeting.
Right.
Just sit there in the audience, support the people that are stepping up, and that's where it all begins. Because at the end of the day, it's your kids.
Yep.
Education, libraries, and our communities are at stake right now. And you've got a political class in Illinois. I mean, you don't even have to draw a difference between Republican and Democrat. They're all pretty much the same. Right. That's looking out for its own interest. Looking out for its own interest and not those of the people that they serve. And you can see that with the degrading conditions that are going on here in DuPage County.
Right, absolutely.
Whether it's a mass shooting in unincorporated Willowbrook, you get consistent carjackings and retail theft gangs operating in Oak Brook. You got the schools and you got the libraries. I mean, it's all nuts. And what it does is it's going to take people to step up and say, hey, the emperor has no clothes. Why are we doing this? Why do the people that we elect, who are supposed to solve problems on our behalf, aren't doing that?
It's not hopeless, right? I mean, read about the. Is my mic on? There we go. Read about the American Revolution. It was a minority, right? It was a minority that started this country. It wasn't a majority.
In August of 1776, at Brooklyn Heights, General Washington had 15,000 men. By the time he got chased across New Jersey over the Delaware River, he had barely 2,000 men.
Right.
But he had the will to fight.
Right. And that's what. And you know what? The fight should be the motivation, right? And most people don't want to. They don't want to inhabit that kind of existence. But I mean, I would say then do a little more reflecting about what it is you're inhabiting, and there's an existential question there to be had. But Jeff, I've seen you at we met a couple of years ago. I talked to you and your wife outside of a school board meeting, and I continue to see you at these meetings today. And we've talked about the possible feeling of futility, but in the supposed hopelessness of Illinois, I still see you out there. What drives you?
Yeah, well, I kind of came into the game a little later in my life. My wife was in it before me, and I was kind of conscripted into it over a number of years that she was active.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah. And, the more I got involved with it, the more interested I became. And then part of it was, I'd sit and watch the news and I'd be railing at the news, and my wife kept saying, I'm tired of hearing you complain about what you're seeing on the news. Why don't you get up and do more about it? And I was like, so I was kind of guilted into it as she was conscripting me, But as I got more involved with people like yourself and Noel, I found that there were a lot of people that were not happy with what's going on. And I see we do have some strength in numbers, and just what's gone on in the last couple of weeks, shows that we're having an impact.
Well, camaraderie is,
right. There is power in numbers, and it's the only way we're going to make a difference. And it's true. There are a lot more of us. There are them.
Yep.
And,
there is. We only need a minority to motivate the majority to stand up. I mean, hey, I'm happy to do the speaking. If Terry's happy to do the speaking, you guys are happy to do the speaking, as long as we get some support, right?
Yeah, I have to do more public speaking. And like everybody, I'm not that comfortable with it, and I do it a little bit here and there, but I need to push myself to do more.
Yeah, I mean, we all can do more, definitely, to save our country. What about you, Chris? You've obviously written a book that I thoroughly enjoy and I think is You know, an excellent rebuttal to the rules for radicals of Saul Alinsky, and the prescription, it actually works. I mean, Terry and I have told you, you know, a number of occasions that we've kind of put into play your tactics, and we've seen the results on the other end, and they've worked. So, you know, what motivated you to, you know, to speak up and to
Well,
you know,
it's kind of a
prescribe
long
that?
story. I actually got involved in the 1980s with the pro-life movement. I realized back then, if the rights of any one segment of society, including these little unborn children, can be just arbitrarily ignored and trampled, the rights of all are threatened. And so that's how I got into it. I began realizing again in Wyoming there that, well, I'm surrounded by Republicans. We're all going to be on the same page. No, we weren't. And that's when I began realizing the threat of all the leftist infiltrators in the Republican Party. I'd like to go back to one of the comments that you made a few minutes ago. Several of you have said this, and you're absolutely right about there's a lot more of us than we realize. The only way that they can beat us, the only way they can beat us is to convince us not to fight. Alinsky's book was Rules for Radicals. It was not rules for the majority and how do we just implement this utopia for all of us. It was how does this little fringe use dirty tricks, fear, intimidation, lies, mockery, other things like that. How do we use this to cow the majority into passivity,
right?
At which point we dominate. Right. And so, yeah, once we realize the emperor has no clothes, there's a lot more of us than them, these things, these lessons are real. Once we realize that, the situation you're in right now, the only way they can do this is if you guys stand down and say, you know what, I'm tired of this, I don't want to fight this fight, or I'm embarrassed, or maybe there's too many of them, maybe we really are just a little bunch of extremists on the far right. If you do that, you back off, they have won. They wouldn't be so terrified of you people that they pull these dirty tactics that you've been describing if it was truly just a handful of you, and they could say, all right, let them spout off, let them you know, have their say, and then they're gonna then we'll move on with business as usual, and nothing will be nobody will be the wiser, nothing will be better for it. No, they're scared to death that you guys will connect with the people on Main Street, because the people on Main Street don't want their kids being dragged into, you know, involuntary gender reassignment and this kind of nonsense. People on Main Street don't want their communities overrun with illegals. The people on Main Street, they want to live out their lives. You guys have the answers to how to get there. The rhinos have the answers how to sound good while making themselves rich and doing nothing, and they do not want that interference. But if you guys stand fast and you connect with these people, then that political establishment, then it becomes obvious they're the paper tiger.
Right. Yeah, you know, their recent reaction to all this really validates who and what we are.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
They're scared to death of you.
Yeah.
Hey, what do they say? It shows us that we're over the target, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we've been on for a while here. We better wrap up. I'm going to make a bit of a closing statement here, but Noel, I want to thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
Jeff, appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me again.
Chris, thanks so much. This won't be the last time we talk. We always appreciate your input, and you're welcome.
Look forward to it.
Welcome
Keep
to
up the good work.
You're welcome to stay on. So I just want to say a couple things in closing about my partner Terry Newsom. So, you know, I've heard from a number of people that you know, Terry just wanted to push, including establishment Republicans and law enforcement, that Terry just wants attention, that Terry just wants to push buttons. I've heard from other people like, what are you involved in that guy for? Have you seen him on Facebook? He's bombastic, he's disrespectful, whatever the case may be. But I wanna defend Terry, because you walk a mile in Terry Newsom's shoes. Okay, you go to a Phoenix airport and have the Department of Transportation pull you out of line because you're on a terror watch list. Why? Because you stuck up for your kids who were in high school and were exposed to pornography in the library, or had to see a tampon machine in the boys' bathroom. or had to hear about critical race theory and how being white means you're inherently a bad person, or hearing, some radical gender ideology specialist come in and tell you that, fourth graders are sexualized and at 60 you can decide that you're gay.
Or the opposite sex.
Or the opposite sex. Terry took it upon himself to go out and to speak out against these messages, and he had the federal government rain down their power upon him. And you know what? When you go and you decide you're going to criticize Terry Newsom and you're going to suggest that he's doing all of this for just some attention, then I want you to feel the pressure of having the federal government point the gun at you and suggest that because you stand up for the Constitution, because you stand up for your own children, that you should be vilified and you should be labeled as a radical extremist. And then you go to where you're supposed to have friends, right? Your own Republican Party is supposed to stand up for the values that you, Terry Newsom, go out and speak out against at school board meetings or library meetings, or you challenge the people that they're supposed to challenge, like Sean Casten, a radical Democrat in Illinois who stands up for removing parents' constitutional rights. You go ahead and criticize Terry, but then you walk a mile in his shoes. And I tell you what, I guarantee all you people who are criticizing Terry won't have the guts to do that. This guy opened his door last Tuesday to the state police who terrified his wife to the point of tears and his 80-something-year-old grandmother. And why were they there? For the crime of political speech. Because Terry dared speak out against rhinos like John Curran, who want to assist the Democrats in raining communism down on Illinois and helping to ruin our children's future. You go ahead and you can criticize Terry Newsom, but I guarantee you one thing: you won't walk a mile in his shoes. You won't welcome the spotlight that is the federal government and the point of their gun. Terry's not making any money for this, folks. All right? Terry's trying to start a coalition of citizens, just like the revolutionaries did back in the late 1700s. And yeah, I am going to compare it again to that. And the reason I'm going to compare it to that is because we're losing our rights. We're losing our country. The Democrats in Illinois are passing legislation that violates our constitutional rights. That is what you call unprecedented. Okay? America is on the brink, and it's because we have radical Democrats who've turned into communists over a long period of time because of corruption from special interest and foreign interest. And it has seeped all the way down to our local level. And one of the only people I know that has the guts to stand up to people who will criticize him and even weaponize law enforcement against him is Terry Newsom. So yeah, I sit here every week and I talk about those people and how they're wrong and how they need to be removed from the equation. And I stand by Terry Newsom because he actually stands for something. He stands on principle. And you might not like the message that he delivers, but he's standing up for what he believes in, and that's more that I can say for any of the Republicans in Illinois, because they won't even oppose the radical agenda of the Democrats. I didn't see one of them sitting in the front row with Terry and I at the book ban bill event when we questioned Sean Casten and his motives. So for anybody challenging Terry Newsom, I would say maybe come to an event and sit across from Sean Casten and ask him a few questions about indoctrinating our children before you go and say that, you know what, he's a demon because he did some stuff that was wrong 35 years ago. So again, I want to thank you to our guests for coming. I want to tell people like Greg Boltz and John Curran and law enforcement in DuPage County that we're not going to shut up. Terry's not going to shut up, and we're going to keep calling out their corruption, and we're going to change the Republican Party in Illinois because it doesn't exist anymore anyway. So please hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next week.
Great job.
Are we off?
Every time we pull up, you see stars, you see stripes, you see flags on the cars and the trucks and the bikes. Every time we pull up, we go hard, we outside, we got flags on our arms that are up, we don't care if you mad. We cherish this land, the haters can get buried in rags. They set fire to old glory, turning fabric to ash. But every time we pull up, all you're gonna see's America.